It's time once again for A Moment with Bob. Brought to you by your friends from Offshore Drilling. Tonight's Moment with Bob, the persistence of memory. Hey, Mike. The elite surround themselves with their peers, minions, and court jesters. The minions are expendable, the jesters replaceable, and periodically they wage war against their peers. But the elite can always agree on this. They never support anything that would thwart whatever it is they want to do. And they want what all gangsters have always wanted, more. Yesterday, I read the latest at the Brilliant at Breakfast blog. The rise and fall of progressive talk radio. The woman who wrote the column extensively quotes from a column at truthout.org written by Peter B. Collins. His article was an insider's view of the progressive talk radio devolution. The blogger at Brilliant at Breakfast and Peter B. got some of it right, but most of it wrong. First, a disclaimer. The optimists say that the glass is half full. The pessimists say the glass is half empty. I tend to think the glass is half empty and we're all going to die. But I digress. Our benign, so far, fascistic overlords, benign domestically anyway, unless you're not white, don't want progressive talk radio. And so there will be no more progressive talk radio. Back in the day, Hitler's, Mussolini's, and Stalin's thugs would have physically destroyed the radio stations and done something pretty horrible to the people who ran the stations. This was an effective visual aid for anyone who might have thought about getting into the anti-regime radio business. These days, the elite don't disappear the folks who produce progressive radio to concentration camps or gulags. They just make them disappear from the radio. You can't find Mike Malloy, Tom Hartman, or Stephanie Miller on KPTK in Seattle anymore, not because their ratings were low, but because the elite won't allow progressive talk radio to exist in Seattle. Now, Seattle has three, count them, three sports radio stations, and of course there's always room for conservative talking points radio. CBS said they dumped KPTK's format of progressive talk and embraced sports talk because of low ratings. I say that's a lie. What? Sputters radio executives across the land clutching their pearls and Arbitron ratings books. Are you saying the hard-wrought data laboriously collected by Arbitron drones are nuggets of the purest gold? Yes, I am. Radio program ratings are estimates based upon a fiction. Ancient oracles would slice open a bird and root around in the carcass for something to interpret the past, present, and future. If only the fine folks at Arbitron would adapt this more rigorous scientific methodology. Currently, I don't have the time or the will to dissect the mysterious inner workings of an Arbitron ratings book, but trust me, it's junk. The books are cooked. If we really lived in the reality as described by Arbitron, pocket watches would hang limply from the limbs of barren trees. Progressive talk is disappearing from the radio because that's what happens when an open society is transforming itself to a closed society. Just ask Naomi Wolf. Her book, The End of America, Letter of Warnings to a Young Patriot, clearly demonstrates this progression by comparing what's been happening in the United States since George W. Bush came into office with other countries that embraced fascism and totalitarianism. She put together a fascistic to-do list from the playbooks of Mussolini, Hitler, and Stalin. Here are some of her ideas. Invoke an internal and external threat. Before 9/11, nobody had ever heard of Al-Qaeda. Now they're everywhere. Establish secret prisons. Sherwood Ross reported in the Public Record, quote, 28 nations have cooperated with the U.S. to detain in their prisons and sometimes to interrogate and torture suspects arrested as part of the U.S. so-called war on terror, end quote. Develop a paramilitary force. Blackwater changed their name to EXE Services, and since nobody was really sure how to pronounce that, they changed their name again to Academy. Academy is currently the largest of the U.S. State Department's 3 private security contractors. Surveil ordinary citizens. We've been warrantlessly wiretapped since before 9/11. That's right. It turns out that 7 months before 9/11, the Bush-Cheney regime instructed the National Security Agency to force American telecommunications companies to spy illegally on Americans. Infiltrate citizens groups. From the 2000 edition of Project Censored, quote, law enforcement agencies spy on innocent citizens, end quote. Arbitrarily detain and release citizens. This is just one of the many examples Naomi Wolf wrote about. Quote, Jan Adams and Rebecca Gordon, American peace activists, tried to check in at the San Francisco airport for a trip to Boston in August 2002. Airport personnel who said that these middle-aged women were on the master list called the police and notified the FBI. End quote. Target key individuals. Bradley Manning and Julian Assange come readily to mind. Subvert the rule of law. From the moment the Supreme Court handed the presidency to George W. Bush, the hits just kept on happening. The current president claims he can kill anybody he wants to, and the Attorney General of the United States says this extrajudicial process is legal. Some dim bulbs out there probably think extrajudicial is a good thing, like extra crispy. Restrict the press. If a lapdog suddenly wants to act like a watchdog, it invariably becomes an unemployed dog. Just ask Dan Rather. And this is a part of the playbook that pertains to the current state of progressive talk radio. It's not necessary to fire the guy on the soapbox. That's too messy in public. If you own the soapbox, you just pull it out from under him and give it to somebody else. Preferably to someone who has memorized sports statistics. And another avenue of information is gone. The Brilliant at Breakfast blogger and Peter B. Collins are correct when they say the Democratic leadership has never supported progressive radio. But why is that surprising? The Democratic Party has morphed over the last 3 decades into the Democratic Party Incorporated. The oratory has gotten better. Obama's speeches are breathtaking, but the policies are designed for the elite. The horrors initiated by the Bush-Cheney regime are all still in place. Obama has refined some of them and made up a few of his own. If you get all your information from the nightly news, you wouldn't know anything about the chilling aspects of the National Defense Authorization Act Obama signed into law on New Year's Eve 2011. As Chris Hedges wrote, though, quote, this is, in essence, extraordinary rendition of U.S. citizens. It empowers the government to ship detainees to the jails of some of the most repressive regimes on earth, end quote. One by one, the lights go out. Technology might make it possible for progressive talk to be accessible in some other forms. But for the rest of us driving down a dark road in the middle of the night with nothing but sports talk on the radio, we'll hope we can find our way with only the persistence of memory. We will try to remember how things used to be and hope that we'll be good enough to get us safely home. Regards, Bob. The persistence of memory. Another moment with Bob, brought to you by your friends at Offshore Drilling. You can find this at superbeans.com. You can find it at opednews.com, and you can find it at tvnewslies.org, and probably thousands of other places too. So check it out.